I'm Danny, and this is Where Did I Go? A podcast for women in the messy middle of motherhood, midlife, and the identity shifts that come with it. If you're doing all the things, but wondering where you went in the process, you're not alone, and you're definitely in the right place. Maybe you're deep in motherhood, drifting through perimenopause, or just feeling a little bit foggy and far from yourself. Either way, I'm so glad you're here. I've got some amazing stories to share with you. Each week, I'll be joined by brilliant women and experts to talk about the mental and emotional fog that can creep in during big life transitions, and how, by shifting the lens, we can start to see this time not as a loss, but as a powerful expansion. We're keeping it honest, sometimes sweary, always supportive. So hit follow or subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like what you hear, leave a review. If you fancy, come say hi on Instagram at wheredidigo.podcast. I'd love to hear your story. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel guilty all of the time as a mum. From how I show up for my kids, to how I show up at work, and most importantly, how I show up for myself. I always feel like I'm falling short. That's why I'm really excited to talk today with Belinda Jane Batt, who's the founder of the Flourishing Mother and an expert in maternal guilt. In this episode, we're going to dive into the pervasive feelings of guilt that many mothers experience, exploring why these feelings arise and how they shape our identities. And probably most importantly, how we can break free from that guilt spiral that we seem to find ourselves in. Belinda shares her experience in positive psychology, offering practical and compassionate strategies to help mothers balance their personal and professional lives without being overwhelmed by guilt. So, if you've ever felt like you're constantly falling short as a mum, this conversation will definitely help you understand why. Spoiler alert, you're definitely doing better than you think. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Belinda Batt. Belinda's an expert on maternal guilt and the founder of the Flourishing Mother. She's also a speaker, author and coach with a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology. And her whole life's work is about helping women navigate the emotional terrain of motherhood with more compassion and less guilt. So I'm really, really excited to have you here today. Hello, Belinda.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. We've been talking about this for weeks and I've been so excited about it.
I know. Like I was just saying, I really feel like I know you, and not just from the connections that we've been, making online, but also just like I've downloaded your book and have been reading it and hearing your voice almost like self-soothing me. There were so many moments in your book where it was almost verbatim thoughts that I'd had in my head at that day or that week. So you feel so familiar and so comforting. So I'm really happy to have you here today.
That's lovely. Yeah, I feel the same. I've been seeing all your posts as well and thinking like, I knew we would get on.
Like friends, yay. So I would love to just kick off with a bit of an introduction to you. Like, who are you? What's your story? How many kids have you got? All of that good stuff.
So I have two children who are currently 4 and almost 7. My background was 2+ decades working in PR, very kind of mostly unfulfilling, I would say, background in PR. And I did my long time ago, my undergraduate degree in psychology, but, like many undergraduates, didn't really take it all that seriously first time around. So when I had my son almost 7 years ago, I can't believe it. It's almost 7 years ago. I think I kind of saw what was ahead for me, what was coming in terms of my career, looking at how things are for women when they have children. Obviously, I didn't know what it would be like at that point, but I think about a year out from having him, I started thinking what's going to happen, because this industry is not a very forgiving industry, when you don't have children, let alone when you have children. So I kind of thought, when I have kids, this is potentially going to be a bit of a tricky industry to navigate. So long story short, I decided to go back to psychology and to take my master's degree. And then I had my son, paused the degree for a year or so to have my maternity leave. And then during that time, experienced so much guilt in the first year of motherhood. It was like, oh my God, this is horrendous. And then I came back to finish the degree, and I had to do my thesis, and it was the obvious topic for me to do my thesis on. I was just like, there's nothing else I want to talk about except the lived experience of maternal guilt. So I did my first research, in that sense, in my academic sense, which was very much looking at the first year of motherhood and what that's like for mums and how guilt manifests. And in the years since, I have extended the research in a non-academic sense, purely like out of a passion project, basically just talking to mums, logging their experiences, mums of older children, more diverse, range of mothers and experiences. And so that is what led to writing the book, because I sort of started gathering all this intel and realised that I needed to do something with it, basically.
It's really interesting. There's like an inflection point with motherhood where it's like the person you were before has this totally new perspective when you have children that then changes everything. It's like you can't go back to the person you were before. You can't go back to the version of you that was doing a job that was unfulfilling, or there's like this whole new way of seeing the world or a whole new set of problems that you've just had exposed to you. And I've spoken to so many women who've just made these amazing decisions to focus on something entirely new right after having children. And I just think it's a very amazing moment of realization or transformation or whatever you want to call it that kind of happens in that motherhood shift.
Yeah, and I love the term matrescence that people, that is starting to come to the fore more now, because it really is. It's like a total metamorphosis, of the self. And I think for me, at least, and probably for a lot of mums, there is that having children, like, it brings everything into sharp focus, doesn't it? And it makes you question your values and your it gives you a new sense of meaning and purpose. At least it did for me. I just kind of thought, oh my God, do I want to be stuck in this career in 20 years time that I still don't like? Just to pay the bills, and how is that role modeling to my children? And actually that's what started a lot of it, was thinking, how do I want my children to see me? Because I don't want them to see me not happy or slogging away in a job that I don't enjoy or being miserable, because that's not what I want them to internalize about their own life, And it's just, I'm just so glad that I've sort of done it, stepped out of the comfort zone, because it's so hard to do that. But yesterday my son said to me, "Mummy, I'm really proud of you for writing your book." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is exactly why."
Yeah. We'll talk about some of the bits that I've noticed in your book a bit later on, but I definitely, it really stuck out to me, some of those exercises where you've got questions or prompts like, this is what I want my children to think about me. It was actually, when I saw that, it was quite confronting in a way, because there is this like tension almost with some of the ways that you not just live your life, but some of the ways that you talk to yourself, and then the hopes you have for your children about how you want them to see themselves and how you want them to think about you in the future when they're old. It was like, I think just such a simple question, but a complex one.
I think it is confronting, and it probably needs to be confronting to some extent. It's a difficult one, because you don't want it to all be about how your children are going to see you. We need to focus on making changes for the sake of our own well-being, not just on making changes for the sake of our children's well-being, if that makes sense. Sometimes I think we can be so selfless in motherhood that the only way we can make change or be motivated to make change is if we see it through the eyes of being for someone else, like for our children. So there is this duality to it, because it's good that we think about how we're role modeling, and it's good that we think about how it's affecting our children, but I also don't want mothers to think that that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is that we are recognizing how important it is to focus on our own well-being. And actually, by default, when you focus on your own well-being, everyone else around you is going to be happier.
That whole sort of self-sacrificing thing is so problematic, isn't it? And it is so normalised. I think this idea that you can and should exist outside of your children is a really uncomfortable sort of narrative that mums can and should tell themselves, and is so wrapped up in this idea of why we feel so guilty. I feel a lot of guilt just even talking about this idea of having an identity crisis in the same sentence of motherhood, as if it's like a binary thing. I love my children beyond measure. There's no language to communicate how much they mean to me, and how happy I am to be their mum. And yet there is also something that's happened to me that's been challenging. You know, I feel guilt for vocalizing that.
I think this is probably one of the most important things that when I'm working with mums that I talk about is the need to acknowledge that this is much bigger than us. You know, like there is so much social conditioning, and not just in our lifetimes but in our parents' lifetimes and their parents before them, about what it means to be a good mother or a perfect mother. And a good place to start with these feelings of guilt is just to have that awareness that this didn't start with us, and the reason that we feel a lot of the shoulds, it's coming from a place that is outside of ourselves. You know, I think the challenge that we're facing right now particularly has coming to a head because we've had several decades of women moving into paid employment, and we've seen a lot of changes in society, but none that have really been large enough to support the changes that mothers have experienced. So we have, as mothers, gone from a place of, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, mums 50 years ago had it easy and they didn't have to work and they kicked back and relaxed. They did nothing but, you know, make apple pies and whatever. But there was a cultural, a societal difference then. And now we are in a position where many more women have to work for money. It's not so much, it's not like a nice to have, you know, it's a necessity. But what we're also seeing is that, you know, with that comes a lot of guilt. These societal messages, which are very outdated, they're still there. They're still really pervasive. They're still going around in our heads, and society hasn't changed to support the changes that we've gone through as mothers. You know, so we're feeling guilt because we're mothering in this society which is not structured to support our mothering, and it's certainly not structured to support us mothering and working. We need to take that step to have that awareness and be like, okay, this isn't my fault. This is a systemic problem. So I'm going to take a little bit of pressure off myself.
When we talk about the kind of expectations that there are on women, it's actually something that I find a bit hard to articulate. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with particularly men in very open and kind conversations where they've been curious, you know, what are the things that are hard for you? And I know they're there, I just can't really put words on them. It's like I feel the weight of an expectation that I can't articulate. Like, what are some of those pressures that we're facing that we maybe not even aware of? Even
though many of us might be in a relationship and, you know, both partners working and, you know, on the face of it, sharing the childcare or whatever, the reality is that behind closed doors, women are doing more of the domestic labour, women are doing more of the childcare. It's often the woman who is doing the pickups, navigating, you know, all the school stuff. You know, the invisible labour that is associated with motherhood is largely, well, that's the problem. It's associated with motherhood, and it's largely put on our shoulders. And I don't think it is an easy thing to see or articulate, but I think it comes from this conditioning. And actually, the other day I was talking to someone, another mum that I met, and she said that it was driving her mad because she put her husband's name on the school and nursery forms as the contact for this, you know, like the number one primary contact, and they are still searching for her name and calling her. And I think that is those kind of things which demonstrate that it's very much still the woman that is regarded as being responsible for home life and childcare. No matter, however which way you slice it, it's still regarded that men are the ones that, you know, go to work and provide. And it's a very outdated kind of stereotype, but it really persists in modern society. Like, whether we like to admit it or not, it does. And I think if we honestly question ourselves, how things operate in our households, even those of us who like to think we're somewhat, you know, enlightened and progressive, you know, like, I still see it play out in our household.
I agree. And it, you know, the stats that exist, they capture the actual work, but they don't capture the the thinking, the thought process that goes into the even remembering to do something, like forget about household chores, like remembering when there's a kid's birthday party coming up, or that there's a no uniform day at school, or whatever it might be. There's definitely kind of an administrative or logistic process happening every day in our minds that is so hard to offload. Oftentimes because you don't realise you're doing it, and because it's actually just harder to get someone else to do the thinking, because by the time you've got to that point, you may as well have just sort of organised whatever it is yourself. That's definitely one of the things that I find pretty tough. It's also quite interesting when women start to internalise a lot of those feelings that is their job. Like, does it start in childhood? At what point are we beginning to branch out between our expectations of girls and boys, or men and women? Because I noticed one of the things that you mentioned in your book, that which I'm very like, I really want to talk about this idea of men within the concept of motherhood, because I'm very aware that I don't want to spread a message of like, men are bad, or like that they're the problem here. It's more like, what is the relationship between men and motherhood, or what are the unspoken truths? And I noticed you asked the question, like, how do men feel? Do they feel guilt? And you mentioned that only when they haven't internalized those sort of systemic beliefs about the role of the man, when they haven't done that, then yes, they feel guilt, but when they have, then they feel it much less. So there's obviously a process that starts way early in our lives, and I'm curious, like, when that is, and how we can sort of start to make really important changes earlier on in the way we're bringing up children.
Well, I think it comes down to valuing care work more highly. That is a real problem that we have, is that we are a society that doesn't value care work. We don't value the work that is mothering. We don't see mothering as a job in its own right, which it absolutely is. So the question is, how do we instill in our children the view that mothering and care work is as valuable as earning money is? That's how we do it. Yeah. It's not complicated. It doesn't matter if it's the man in your family who's earning the money and the woman's at home. What matters is that both roles, however they're set up, are valued equally within your family, and that your children understand that message. Yeah. That's what matters, I think.
Absolutely. And there's that, I really like in what you've just mentioned, this idea that the role men play in that is about modelling and communicating value, that it shouldn't just be on women shouting from the sidelines like, hey, like, this is really important work. No, that should be a feeling that is echoed from all the parts of our lives, where we feel that we're valued, but we're also being told that we're valued by others, both directly and indirectly. Especially, I think, for mothers who aren't the breadwinners, or who aren't in, high pressure or full-time roles, whatever it might be, there is a certain sort of like evaluation that comes with that. But the reality is, families couldn't exist unless someone made that choice. So,
and generally speaking, the men have a higher earning potential, and I think this is really problematic, because if women can't earn as much, then it makes sense for the man to be the one that's the main breadwinner. But that's really frustrating, because then we hit this glass ceiling. And it just feeds into this the feeling, I think, that we have as women, that we are less worthy if we're not able to make as much money, if we if the work of mothering is not regarded more highly by society. Like, all of these things feed into a sense of low self-worth, which I think is really damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. So guilt is a really pervasive sort of theme within motherhood right now. What are some of the ways that it shows up?
I think it shows up in a million different ways. I think a very common way is particularly around mothers going back to work after they have children. It works both ways. There's this constant push-pull of wanting to be more present with our children, but feeling that we have to do work, or wanting to be present with our work, but worrying about, what's happening with our kids. So I've seen that a lot. And then just like on the day to day, I think because women have internalized this role of bearing the bulk of the responsibility for child rearing, we question all our decisions and whether they're right or wrong and whether they're damaging our kids or not. And I speak to this point a lot because I'm on my own a lot with the kids. I worry sometimes about them watching too many screens and how that is damaging them, and whether I should be playing with them more, but I don't really like playing very much, and that's okay. Like I've sort of interrogated all of this stuff. It's kind of, and read all these studies, and I've managed to get I still feel guilt. Someone asked me this the other day, like, do you still feel guilt? I was like, I still feel guilt every day, but I just have read enough and studied enough and experienced enough and spoken to enough mums to sort of think, okay, we've got to give ourselves a break at some point. It's really important to not this is the crux of what I talk about in the book, obviously, is challenging the guilt, but it is really important to take pause and lead with self-compassion. We are doing the best we can, and I think it's easier to do that when you see these systemic sort of social conditioning issues, when you sort of really understand where it's coming from. And actually one of the tips that I would offer is ask yourself whose voice your guilt is talking to you in. Is it your own voice, which is really actually a good voice to listen to because it's trying to align you back to your values, and is it saying to you, okay, they've watched too much TV today, it's probably time to connect with them, let's just turn it off. And that's good guilt. It's kind of like, oh, I'd like to do another half an hour of work, but kind of got that like niggling feeling that maybe I should turn the TV off and do something with them. So that's my voice, and that's good guilt, and that kind of guilt is fine. But when it's the other voice, which is, oh my God, your children watch too much TV every day, and you are actually a really bad mum, because all the other mums are not doing that. And Sally 3 doors down, her kids don't watch any TV. Why do you need to put the TV? What's wrong with you? Like, you are, that's the bad one.
That's so true. And you know what? It's all sort of coming back to this idea of valuing your self-worth, because quite often I think guilt creeps in when you've put your needs so far down the bottom of the list that prioritizing it is met with shame. So let's say, for example, the screen thing. Sometimes you need a break, and sometimes the only way you can have that break is by putting the TV on. And it's so true that rather than then just taking the break and enjoying it, you're running through your head all the ways that means you're a bad parent, or that your children are going to develop in ways that you don't want them to develop, or all the ways that you're messing them up. And that's purely because we've really internalized this belief that we matter way less than anyone else. And that's, I think, been a real eye-opener for me lately, because for me at least, like, I don't even check, I'm not able to feed myself a different narrative, because the only one that I can reach for is the one that is feeding me guilt. I don't have another voice to sort of tap into that is that, no, actually, remember, right now, you just need to, whatever it might be, insert whatever, go out with your friends, go for a run, take a shower. Sometimes it's like really basic stuff that you're asking to be able to do, and even that is met with this feeling of, oh, but I should really be doing the other thing for the kids or for the family or whoever it might be instead. So just having access to those other narratives, I think, is really important, like talking about it basically.
It's so important. And I think we've got to realise that if we don't, I think maybe that is when you have to think about the impact it has on other people if you don't take care of yourself. I mean, one of the mums I spoke to in the book was really interesting because she had been a full-time working mother, and she had felt so guilty about not being around for her children that she had quit her job completely to be at home with them, and devoted herself so completely to them that she felt completely exhausted and burnt out and miserable, and wasn't doing anything for herself at all. And then one day she said, I think she might have said it was her birthday, or something came around, and she was asked what she needed or what she wanted, and she said, I just really want to go back to the gym. And then like her partner was just like, well, that's fine, you know, like
Yeah.
do it. But she found it so hard to give herself permission. And then she started going to the gym again and absolutely loved it and felt like 1,000 times better. And she said that her children found it a bit weird to begin with because she was around less. But then everyone got so much out of it, like because they saw she was happier, she felt happier, and their behaviour improved as well. So, you know, that's a great example of why we need to take care of ourselves. We think we need to put our needs at the bottom of the list, but how many times have you done that and then ended up just being snappy, horrible mum, like monster mum? I've done that so many times. Like by the time bath time comes around, you just feel like a fire-breathing dragon and like you're just screaming at everyone. That's not very good for anyone, is it?
No,
So, like,
definitely not good. And it's like you kind of bottle it up, and then at some point it just explodes. Like that frustration and that
it will.
Absolute self-preserving voice that's like, you need to do something for yourself. That doesn't go anywhere. It just gets more like a pressure cooker, and it does just erupt. Yesterday was such a horrible morning where I just felt like the worst mum in the world because I totally had no surplus left. And I do think kids pick up on that as well. Their behaviour changes when they can see that you're not good. I think maybe it makes them anxious, or I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, my kids are certainly they act up way more when I'm on the edge, and my tolerance for it is super low. And yesterday I was just like shouting at them, and I could, you know, it's like an out of body moment where I knew that all I needed prior to that moment was just a break, and I'd not asked for one or felt that it was important enough. But actually everyone then suffered because I didn't do that. So I totally get that.
Yeah. I've had the same recently. My husband sent me out of the bathroom about a week ago because I was like, I just can't do it. I just can't do it anymore. He was like, do you want to just step out? And I was like, no, because they need to get out of the bath and they need this. And he was like, I think you should just step out. But it's discipline, right? Because like going back to the invisible load and the mental and emotional labour and everything, it's not easy to ask for that time because we feel that we don't deserve it. But it's also not easy to make space in our brains for it. And you know, in the last couple of weeks, because I've had the book launch and loads of really stressful stuff, and I have felt that stress really, like, you know, it's gone in, you notice it, don't you? And like you suddenly not exercising and then suddenly you're not eating well and all the good habits have gone out the window and you're working late and then the lines between work and relaxation completely blur. And then I don't know about you, but then I'm like sitting on the sofa at 10 p.m. trying to do a presentation and I'm half watching TV but half doing my work and actually nothing's getting done and I just feel really tired. And then you wake up feeling tired and, you know, it's just this constant cycle. And I caught myself last week and I thought, I'm going down that spiral of just exhaustion and, you know, unhealthy habits and all the rest of it. And then on the day that I launched the book, I looked at my to-do list and I'm like, there are so many things on this list of work. And then there is like the dentist, the doctor, the this, the that, oh my God, there is so much admin, you know, getting ready for my son's party. We're going on holiday in 2 weeks. And I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to work as much as I can work. And then at 3:00, I'm going to the beach.
Yes.
That's it. I'm just going. And and my brain was like, no, you must not do that. You know, there is so much stuff you need to do. You can't go to the beach. And I just thought, God, do you know what? If I cannot stop for 2 hours before I have to go back into mum mode, take over the kids again, do bedtime, bath time, and celebrate this achievement in my life, you know, but I'm not saying it has to be a big achievement because it be anything. If I can't stop and just go, oh my God, you know, you're doing a good job. It's hard and it's a lot. And if you can't just stop every now and then and say, I just need a break and I'm just going to take it. And I might not I will never feel that I've done everything on my list. But if I don't get that headspace, you know, it's going to be bad for everyone. So I went off to the beach. It was so nice. And I felt like a different person when I got back. You know, I was so patient, and I played with my children, which is, I suggested a game of happy families and, all of this kind of stuff. Which never happened.
It's so true though. It's that whole cliche about like rest being productive, and it's so true. If you just take the time, you come back and you're whatever it might be, mothering or work, you're a better version of the person that just tried to power through. And why is it so hard to just make that decision?
Also, as women, having that awareness of our energy levels, and I'm getting more and more interested into, cycles. I mean, God, I'm in my 40s now, and like menopause is staring me in the face. So I'm sort of starting to feel more interested in that as well. We need to think about when we're least resourced, and actually there are certain times in our cycle when we really are like at rock bottom, and we are especially vulnerable to guilt and shame and all of that in those moments when we're really at our worst resourced. And I just think we've got to look at it differently. We've got to think about, how can I help myself, support myself. I mean, I'm 43 and it's taken me 43 years to even think about how my cycles might affect my work.
Yeah.
No employer, even now, like even the most progressive employer probably doesn't want to hear about that kind of stuff. But I suppose from my angle, I'm curious about how that interacts with guilt, because I think it is probably as simple as when we are feeling least resourced, we are most vulnerable to guilt. So it might follow, maybe there's some research in this that we need to do, but it might follow that in the first week or two of your cycle, you're particularly vulnerable to guilt. Wouldn't that be interesting to find out?
It makes a lot of sense. Oh my goodness. Like I can only speak from personal experience when I've really been struggling at work during certain parts of my cycle, which in and of themselves can be quite tough for a lot of women, especially actually after you've had children. Like I know for me, my cycle has changed so much since I've had kids. Like I have these really heavy periods now that are just so draining. So there's like a good week of the month where I'm really having to dig deep, both like physically feeling it's sore, and just generally like energy levels are rock bottom, because I mean you're literally bleeding, right? Like you're going to feel depleted. So makes a lot of sense. Let's see how much of this we keep in the podcast, because I'm not sure how much I want to put my period talk on the internet. But I mean, I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Like we're trying to, it's this icky thing when it shouldn't be an icky thing at all. It's the most natural thing in the world.
It is, and it's also when we're trying to explain to men why it's harder for women. I mean, I can talk till I'm blue in the face about all the societal systemic reasons, and they're all completely valid. But there's this whole other layer, which is the physical, which is that we do have a very different lived experience, going through this life of, to some extent being slaves to our hormones. It's a whole nother layer that isn't talked about. And like you say, it's icky. People don't want to talk about periods and cycles and like, oh God, no, we don't talk about that because, it's like women's business, but actually it's all part of the problem.
Yeah, definitely. And something I touched upon in the previous episode, which I feel like it's a recurrent theme, is this idea of how women are masking, and we're walking through life pushing through because we're masking so much of our reality. We're masking that we're tired, we're masking that we're stretched, we're masking that we might be having a really complicated period that is draining us. It's just like there are so many parts that we're pushing into some invisible space, when actually we need to sort of give them a bit of space within our outward self, because we're not perfect and we're bringing a lot of messiness into the workplace and into our personal lives, and that needs to be okay. We need to be able to just say that. I know that my poor boss, bless him, I've come in and just been really honest about, I don't know, like even for actually my period, but he's just so graceful about it and so understanding. And I think the hard bit is just saying the words, and then actually the reaction might be indifference most of the time. Like, cool, take the time you need, do what you need to do. That might be the answer, and just having that permission can be really empowering.
But that's part of the problem, isn't it? Is that we feel that it's all part of our vulnerability. It feeds into this vulnerability, the sense that we're not as good as our male counterparts, particularly when we're talking about being at work. We don't want to admit to having not had a good night's sleep, having period pains, whatever it may be, because it makes us look weak or weaker than our male counterparts, and then so that's why we do the masking, isn't it? But you're right. Like in a fair world, these challenges that women face would be much more openly talked about and supported.
Yeah. No, I feel you, and I think I just feel really strongly that it's not like women are out here being like, oh, it's really hard being a woman and we just can't like fit into the system. It's like, no, we are trying to squash ourselves into a system that is squashing us in return. And actually what we just need is a bit of support to be able to bring our best self, because we can do so much. I would argue there's an unbelievable amount of untapped potential in certainly within mothers, because like you say, we are so hyper efficient, so capable, developing so many skills. If I think of what I can do now versus before I had kids, I mean, it's incomparable. And if you can tap into that potential, that's both brilliant for business, but it's also really motivating for your workforce. It builds loyalty, it builds a sense of connectedness, so people feel more invested in their work. It's just like, it's good on all the levels. But we're really leaning into this sort of almost post industrialization, we work in a factory, so we clock in, we clock out mindset, which is not the reality that we're living in today.
Yeah, and the guilt surfaces as a direct reaction to not having our needs met. Because we are trying to do everything we're trying to operate mothering and work, for those of us in paid employment, within these systems which are like diametrically opposed to what we actually need to flourish.
It's true, and it's probably a real blind spot for a lot of people that they're not aware of. That's where the guilt is coming from. It feels like you're feeling guilty because you're wrong, but actually it's not. It's this external set of stimuluses that are just like coming at you all the time. So let's talk about what can we do then? Like, how do we break the cycle? How do we get better at feeling guilty?
We touched upon earlier the fact that we need to have that awareness. I think a lot of us don't have that awareness, that the guilt is in large part caused by the outdated societal narratives that we have internalized. So I think just having that awareness can be helpful, and can give us a bit of a framework to begin to incorporate some self-compassion, because it's not our fault that we feel it. So I think that's the first step, is just to have that awareness and to start to kind of bring in that self-compassion. I think the next step is challenging the guilt, like I said earlier, with what kind of guilt is this? Is this helpful guilt? Is it me speaking? Is it my own voice? Is it to do with my own value alignment? Or is it societal guilt telling me, like flogging me, telling me that I should be better? Is it helpful or unhelpful? So, and then when it's unhelpful, again, bringing that conscious awareness and being like, I have a choice in how I respond to this. That's where my positive psychology hat comes on. And it's like, well, I mean, I really hope that all of these societal systemic changes happen. And for sure, we should all be shouting from the rooftops about how they need to happen. But in the meantime, I think we also have to acknowledge that there are ways that we can sort of support ourselves better. I think self-compassion is one. I think we need to get better at rejecting those damaging societal narratives. I think we need to get better at questioning the guilt and saying, like disputing it. This is one of the tools I talk about in the book. Kind of, I don't need to feel this way. I've dropped my son at nursery and I'm feeling like riddled with guilt because he's so little and he doesn't seem happy, and maybe it's too soon for him to go to nursery, and oh my God, it's my fault, I'm a bad mother. But actually stopping and being like, hang on. It's a great nursery. They really care about him. He's being completely cared for. I like my work. I want to work. This is not bad for our family. This is not bad for my son. So just kind of having that conversation with ourselves. It, like you said earlier, it's not binary. It's not like, this is good, this is bad. I mean, yes, it's not ideal if you don't want to leave your child in a nursery and go and work. It's not ideal, but it doesn't mean that it's inherently bad.
Also, this is an extension of that. Rejecting the thought is also being realistic about what the threat, if you want to put it like that, actually is. Like, I think a lot of the time we catastrophize in the sense of like, I'm doing something that is not ideal and that's going to have these lifelong repercussions on my child and his or her well-being, and I'm a terrible mum and it's going to like ruin someone else's life. When reality is, even if something's not ideal, on balance, probably your kids are going to be just fine. Because even the fact that you're questioning if you're a good mum is most likely indicative of the fact that your kids are having a great upbringing and that you're doing the very best you can, and that you're not going to ruin them.
Exactly. I try and have a very core set of kind of rules in my own parenting. Very small, kind of easy to remember thing is like, just if there's a rupture, repair it. Yeah. There and then. Make sure that they know they're loved. Yeah. But if you there is no way that I'm going to go through life pretending that I am this automated human who doesn't have emotions, and like my kids, I want my kids to understand that we're all human. Mummy and daddy are human. We have moments when we don't do a good job,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
doesn't mean, as long as they know they're loved.
Yeah.
And if you flip your lid at bath time and you have to get sent out of the bathroom, by your husband, like, it's not a great moment. But at the end of the day, as long as they understand, everyone has their limits. We're not screwing them up. We're just, we're human.
Just as you were talking, I was just thinking about what I try and say to my kids when they act up. Like, the most important thing that I want them to know is no matter what they feel, no matter how they've acted, we'll talk through that bit, but like, I love them no matter what, like good or bad. They are so loved, irrespective of if they've acted up or not. And there is some part of what you were just saying then that made me realise, when I act up or effectively have like an adult tantrum, I feel like I'm not like as lovable as the version of me that is super put together and super patient. It's like there's a sense of like my self-worth that is affected when the facade cracks. I'm like, oh, but still find me a lovely mum and still remember that I'm a perfect person. It's like, why do I need them to know? Of course I'm still lovable. Of course I'm still a good mum, even though sometimes I crack. But that story is playing out of like imperfect equals some sort of like bad character assessment on myself.
Yeah, no, that completely resonates. It makes me think about coaching, actually, because when we coach, we have this notion of having unconditional positive regard for our clients, and I think that is actually a really good. Gabor Mate talks about unconditional positive regard and attachment. I'm reading his new book, The Myth of Normal, in my book club at the moment, so this is very pertinent. We've been having this conversation, and actually the argument he makes is that's what's important, is that our children know that no matter what happens, that we hold them in unconditional positive regard. And I think, actually, if you flip it, I would say that that's the beautiful thing about children, is that they do hold us in unconditional positive regard, like as their parents. Yeah. So maybe that's our job, saying to them, I will love you no matter what you do, no matter how you act. And maybe when we are able to bring more of that in, maybe that helps to alleviate some of the guilt as well. Because even if we regard ourselves as having screwed up, we still know that our kids know that we love them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my son gave me a really lovely reminder of that whole, through his eyes, I am totally this like mythical, lovable being, when I had been fixating all day about how I shouted at him in the morning and how I felt so bad and I just felt awful. And then he came home and he was like drawing, and he came into the living room and he presented me this like drawing that he'd made of a rainbow, and it like when he gave it to me, he was like, this is for you, Mum, because I love you. And I was just like, I love you so much, you're the best thing in the whole wide world, because I've been sat there feeling like awful mum of the year, and you're not even thinking about that at all. You can't remember it. You're not sat with any like long-term damaging feelings about anything. You're just like, this is a rainbow and I love my mum and here's a picture, and thank you for being so simple about that exchange of feelings. Like, it was just really lovely moment.
It's so nice, isn't it? I think we just have to cut ourselves more slack. I think, the phrase I probably use the most in my work is good enough is good enough.
Yeah.
Because I think we've got to strip back this notion of perfection, because it's killing us trying to get everything right all of the time in motherhood and life and work and everything. It's just really, really bad for us. And I think we just have to start saying, if we slip up, it doesn't matter. Tomorrow's a new day. Good enough is good enough. I do my best. My kids are loved. My kids are fed. My kids are cared for. I'm doing my best. And that is good enough.
Such a simple thing, but so often forgotten. So let's wrap up with a bit of a quick fire round on, if people don't listen to anything else, some of the things that we really hope they might take away from this episode that's specifically on guilt. So what's sort of one key thing, if people do nothing else, what's one key thing people can do to challenge that feeling of guilt in motherhood?
Identify whether it's your voice or society's voice that is talking to you in.
Great. And what is the most, or like a common myth about motherhood that you wish would just disappear tomorrow, that would make the biggest difference to our lives?
That guilt is a normal part of motherhood, and that we have to endure it when we become mothers.
Oh, yes, so true. Oh my gosh. And then just lastly, what's your biggest hope for mothers moving forwards, like as we look into the future?
I hope that on a societal level, things will catch up. I hope that more employers will realise the importance of supporting mothers more. I hope that society will change. I hope that, structures will change in the workplace and beyond, to better support mothers so that we are better able to flourish. And I hope on a personal level that mothers are able to cut ourselves a bit more slack, and realise that good enough is good enough, and be able to celebrate, ourselves a bit more, and create a little bit more space for ourselves.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think it's so sad that we've kind of normalised, as you say, this reality where we don't take any space. And if we can just do one thing, if it's just that 5 minutes a day, even if it has to start that small, to just take it, and to do that without any feeling of guilt or thought actually about anyone else but yourself, I think that would be like a really good, certainly a step I'm going to start taking, because I don't do it, and I should.
It's like that drink your coffee hot thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Let's not joke about drinking the cold coffee. Let's just drink the warm coffee that we really want, because we deserve to.
Yeah. And let's sit down and drink it without like taking the 3-page to-do list and with us. Let's just drink.
Sorting out the laundry on the side and planning what the kids are going to eat that night. Yeah, it's so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
So where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing, and most importantly, your book?
Well, they can email me directly, which is belinda@theflourishingmother.com, if you'd like to know more about the coaching. They can find me on Instagram @flourishingmother. And if you're interested in the book, you can look it up on Amazon, and it's called Challenge Your Guilt. It's available as an ebook for a very limited time. I think it's another week or so at 99p, and then the paperback will be coming out in June. So yeah, look it up.
I'll make sure to add a link into the show notes. Like I've only skimmed through the book so far, but I've highlighted so many parts. There were so many bits where I was just like, yes, like someone's put some language to these things that felt so confusing to me. Like, I can so highly recommend it. It's a really, really good read.
Oh, thank you.
And just really well written as well. So I'm very excited to see where that goes. Like, thank you so much, Belinda. It's just been so nice talking to you today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you.